Welcome to another edition of Vigorously with me, Val Hands. Autumn Kings are in the building. Specifically, Jake is here. Welcome, sir. I'm thrilled to have you. I'm so glad you're here.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
I would love to hear, because I don't know that I know this, the origin story behind Autumn Kings. How did it come to be?
Yeah, Autumn Kings came to be in a grocery store of all places in a
Wow.
town called LaSalle, Ontario, which is actually just across the border from Detroit, just a small suburb outside of Windsor, which is the main city, stone's
Mhm.
throw away from the US. But this was in Canada, and I met Joe, the other singer in the band. I was the cashier. He was the banana boy stacking bananas. We ended up having a chance interaction in a lunchroom during a lunch break that we both shared and started chit-chatting about music and talked about how cool it would be to join a band together sometime and merge forces. And your other musician people will tell you that a lot of times that's one of those empty promises that never comes to fruition. You just say
Yeah.
greeting. But this one actually did. About a year later, we ended up linking up and started a band, worked our butts off, or should I say asses, because we're allowed to swear. And the
Yeah.
rest, so that's the
Okay, well, so what was the secret to actually making this happen? Because you're right, that becomes an empty promise a lot of the time. What was the secret
yeah.
behind you guys saying, no, we're really going to do it?
So it was a really funny coincidence, actually. I always knew I wanted to start a band as soon as I got out of high school. And I
Mhm.
actually didn't want to go to university, but it was hard for me to prove to my parents, who both went to university, that I should do this music thing when I didn't even have a band or any gigs lined up. I had this dream that was living in my delusional head. And so I needed to put it into action. So that was partially a motivator. And the second thing was I was actually scrolling on Facebook one day and I saw a video come up of this girl that I had on Facebook, and she was playing with this guy who was singing harmonies and playing guitar. And I thought it sounded really good. And I just, in the back of my mind, had my eyes peeled on bandmates and other singer to join the band. And then I thought, this is a year after I quit Freshco, is that Joe from Freshco? I saw him
No.
appear on Facebook, like this random. I'm like, oh my God. So I went back to my closet, no word of a lie, dug up my old Blackberry, transferred his contact onto my iPhone, hit him up, put him through the ringer. And I said, hey, can you learn these 24 songs in the next 2 days and come over and jam and we'll play? Because I wanted to see if he was serious. I don't want to waste time. And he did. And he learned all of them. And so that was a cue to me that this was somebody I could play in a band together with.
Oh my God. Did you bond over influences at all?
Yeah, we did. Billy Talent was a not familiar your listeners are with them. They're a
Yeah.
Canadian band. Yeah, huge in Germany, huge in Canada, other parts of the world.
Hmm.
Less so of a presence in the US, but still known. So it was Billy Talent, Rise Against, 3 Days
Yeah.
Grace,
Yeah.
that good rock bands, Disturbed, Nickelback, because we're from Canada, got to do it. And and yeah, and a whole slew of other artists. So it's really funny though, because I come from a hard rock world and a metal world where Metallica is my favorite band, and I
Hmm.
love Pantera and August Burns Red. And Joe comes from pretty much as opposite as you can get. He's a folk guy, so he loves acoustic folk campfire music, which really lends itself well to songwriting because folk music really values the lyrics and melody. And I really valued riffs, structure, songs that slap you in the face and get you amped up. And so we merged the two of those worlds together. And I think with songs like Aliens and one of our new songs, Hellbound, there's a really unique concoction of different genres and different influences all melded into one cohesive piece of music.
So that's essentially the sound, pardon me, of Autumn Kings then. It's just the conglomeration of a little bit of folk, a little bit of metal, a little bit of classic hard rock, all of the
Yeah,
above.
yeah, totally. And I have to say, probably for the last 5 to 10 years, I haven't listened to that much rock because what's happened is I find a lot of it has become a little too predictable for my liking. And so
Mhm.
I love certain parts of rock. I love the riffs. I love the screaming vocals. I love the great melodic choruses. But I also love things that are happening in pop and EDM and reggae
Mm.
and worldly music. And I'm half Lebanese. So my dad would play Lebanese music in the car, Arabic music. And they had these very strange, interesting chord progressions. And they would change the key. It's actually a lot more elaborate than most Western music. And so
Yeah.
I like to splice a little bit of that into our music too. So, and it keeps it interesting as creatives because we never want to be the kind of band that sticks to the same formula from album to album. And
Hmm.
I'm not criticizing or knocking it because some of my favorite bands do that. AC/DC being one example, right?
Yeah.
first from the beginning to now, they have a cohesive sound. Like, it's AC/DC the second you hear it. For us and for bands like Fall Out Boy and Linkin Park, we always say Autumn Kings is like if Linkin Park and Fall Out Boy had a baby. Those bands, they were always pushing the envelope. It's like they were so hard on themselves to stretch the boundaries of what was possible musically while still sounding like themselves. And that's why
Yeah.
they're both one of our biggest inspirations.
Is it possible that Arabic instruments might be included in the future? Because that would be a pretty cool sound.
100%. We our producer Marty just bought a electric sitar,
Oh,
which
okay. Okay.
just just wild. Yeah, just and actually we have. Oh, I wish I could tease it right now, but our manager and label would kill us. We have a heavy song coming out, the heaviest song that we've ever done, with a legendary heavy metal vocalist that all of your listeners will know. And in that song, we have a real sitar throat. It's like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, from India, like handmade, handcrafted. It's just sounds really special.
Okay. I'm open to this. I'm ready for this.
Oh, I'm so tempted right now. God, I'm gonna get some spill the
Well,
beans.
I mean, I could talk music all day too. New Linkin Park, though, the newly established Linkin Park. General thoughts, general feelings on that, because I'm kind of on the fence with all the hubbub and the criticism that's happening
Yeah,
too. What are your
yeah,
thoughts on that, just generally?
sure. Generally, I have to shake my. We have a term in music, like in writing in the studio. It's called demo-itis, where you're used to the way something original sounded, and anytime there's an alternation
Ah,
made to the idea, you don't like it because you're stuck on the original. I definitely had that when I heard the new Linkin Park music. The scandals and controversies, I heard a little bit about it. Okay, guys, like I like to give the benefit of the doubt. This is something new, and of course, it's going to be held to this impossible standards. I don't know the information. I don't really look into that whole part of it. I think they've kept consistent with their sound. Do I think I'm going to be indulging in the new Linkin Park records versus Faint and Numb and Shadow of the
mhm.
Day, Divide, and what I've done? I don't know if I can do that, but I also don't know if I could do that with any of my favorite bands. You know,
Right.
I don't think that's a commentary on the quality of their new music. And I definitely respect Mike Shinoda as the leader of that band having the balls to continue this thing because he knew, I'm sure he sat there for years really and knew no matter what he does, he's going to be subject to criticism. Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah.
So do respect him and the whole band for coming together. And actually, one of my friends is the drummer in the band now, Colin Britton, a guy that I worked with in Nashville, and he's an
Oh,
unbelievable
cool.
successful producer. And I saw a new picture and I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I shot him, dude, get the fuck out of here. Congrats. Like, thanks. And so, it's I'm glad that they're back at it and doing it, and they probably feel maybe a bit of relief, or maybe they're just glad that they were push on.
Yeah. I'm excited to see where they go from here. I'll put it that way. I think it's going to take me a minute to warm up. I'm very cautious
Yeah.
given all the hubbub and the news that just came out. I'm kind of like, I don't
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah.
I think it might take a minute before it grows on me, but I'm the kind of person that's pretty open to anything. Like
Yeah.
I'll listen to anything once is my
Yeah.
personal philosophy. I'll give it one listen. If I like it, great. If I don't, okay, on the
Sure.
next.
Yeah.
I don't.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just curious. I was like, since we're talking music still, I would love to hear the Canadian answer to why Nickelback gets the amount of shit that it does. Because the only like the American perspective is, I think sometimes some of us look at them as like they're trying too hard, and that's why
Mhm.
they're trying too hard and they're just like bland and not really doing anything different. I think that's why they get that reputation here. Do they get that reputation in Canada, and if so, why?
Yeah. It was the same thing in Canada because they're just
Okay.
such a smashed, like from the top of Canada to the bottom of the US. I think that one of the big reasons they were subject to a lot of scrutiny is because they transcended genre boundaries. So they would have music that was topping the charts of rock and topping the charts of country and topping the charts of pop. So somebody might have heard a Nickelback song and thought, hey, this just isn't my cup of tea. Like they're not
Mhm.
discriminating against them in particular. They just didn't like it. Then they switched the channel because this was in the 2000s before Spotify and everything
Yeah,
else
yeah.
came. People were still listening to the radio much more. And then the next station, fuck, Nickelback, hey, switch the station. Oh, good God, I can't get this. And then they're finding reasons not to like them. Oh, his hair. Oh, he's growling with his vocals. He had one song with tongue-in-cheek lyrics that they thought might have been a little too cringe for their own taste. And then they
Hmm.
put the picture together and it became easy because they became so popular. I think it's something innate in our human nature where when somebody rises up to the top that high, the instinct for people is to take pot shots at them for whatever reason.
Mm,
I feel that that is just innate, in human nature unless you're aware of it. So I think
right.
it's, and perhaps another thing too is in Canada on radio, there's actually a CanCon rule where the stations are mandated to play a certain percentage of
I
Canadian
did
music,
know that. I
right?
did know that. I was taught that like in radio. I used to do radio here, like or terrestrial radio in the States before I started doing this for fun. And that's like Radio 101. They teach you FCC laws and they do also mention, hey, if you ever do anything involved with Canada, that law is like, I think it's like at least once an hour, a Canadian artist has
Yeah,
to be part of the playlist.
right. And I think that definitely helped them get to a bigger position, especially in the Canadian market. And maybe
Yeah.
that just massive rise in popularity, especially on the radio, probably just exacerbated the people who would have not had a strong reaction about it. They just would have said it's not my.
Hmm.
And then they're hearing it over and over. And it's like when you see an ad come up a million times on your Facebook, and you're like, God,
And you're
I don't.
like, really?
I get it. Better help. I get it. I get it. You
Or Hello Fresh. Stop.
can't stop everywhere. Every platform I'm on, I'm like, oh my, I get it. You guys are doing great stuff. I'm happy for you. But holy shit.
YouTube is the worst for that. I feel like they're just like, especially when somebody gets to like the good part in their video or like the actual meat of the information that you want from the video. It's like, boom, Hello Fresh. Here's what to make for dinner tonight. And I'm like, no, I already decided what I want to eat. Hello Fresh. Stop. I want to find out like the latest philosophies from Dostoevsky or some whatever. Like I'm watching a YouTube video on. So
Okay.
you reminded me of something that I almost forgot too. They did blow up, and maybe because I was a little bit younger when I was still in like middle school when Nickelback
Mhm.
hit. So I think maybe because I was a little younger, I forgot this. But you're right, they hit very quickly. And I
Yeah.
think it's easy for the rest of the world to look at that and be and just say, this is a little bit sus because it's like, well, why are you getting all these accolades so quickly when we don't
Right.
even know you, when we don't even know if we can say that you quote unquote deserve it?
Hmm.
that that could have been, now that I look back, that could have been part of it too. I
Yeah.
feel you on that.
It's really funny because they grinded for, I think it was 6 or 7 years in Nickelback. And before that, they had their cover band. And so they definitely paid their dues. But when they hit with How You Remind Me in 2001,
Hmm.
everything skyrocketed from there. And then throughout that whole decade of the 2000s, it just became so big so fast that I think you're definitely onto something when yeah, just it just felt suspicious that you just blew up and it became that viral. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, you just ask questions naturally, whether you're curious or whether you are jealous. Some of it
Right.
has to come out of jealousy, I'm sure, which that's not cool. That's the part about the whole thing that I'm like, okay, it's not fair that they're
Mhm.
getting all of the hate for doing what other artists have done that we know we like, and
Yeah.
somehow we respect a little bit more. And yet with them, it's just always that one thing that
Yeah.
explains so much. So who are you listening to lately, just in general?
I'm listening to all sorts of different things right now. I'm listening to a lot of alt music, actually. I'm on an alt kick. And I've always known Cage the Elephant. They were big when I were in,
Yeah, yeah,
but when I listen to the consistently amazing quality of their music from album to album and every single, I'm just blown away. And they're still trying to innovate themselves. And what I love about them, in contrast to a lot of the new rock stuff that's coming out, and these are my people, the rock people are my homeboys and they're my homegirls, but the alt, they scale it back and they're not so loud and blasting and trying to just punch you in the face and rev the
yeah.
engine to the max 24/7. They keep it like sexy and groovy, and you can hear every part of the song and every instrument with utter clarity. And I feel that that's missing with a lot of us producers and writers in rock. We're trying to
Mhm.
just up to the max and make that snare drum hit harder, make that kick hit harder, and make the guitars louder and the vocals louder to the point where it just feels like this indistinct blob of sound, right? And so I love
Yeah,
all of Cage the Elephant. I'm listening to Arctic Monkeys. I'm listening to MGMT,
the
and
classics.
yeah, the classics. And it's going to cycle.
Yeah.
It's going to some more hip hop and then back to rock. But right now, I'm really loving all sorts of alt music.
Yeah, and that's got to come from, I can hear that you're the kind of person who likes to learn about the world. You've traveled the world. You get to experience different bits of music, which can tell you about certain parts of the world. Even if you've never been there, music can be like that cultural export to kind of get an inside view of that culture. Yeah, something that I read about you that it was pretty cool, speaking of that, is that you toured Japanese military bases a few
Yeah.
summers ago. What was going on with that and how was it?
Oh my gosh, it was crazy. That was so last summer we went to Japan, South Korea, and then Guam, the American-owned territory of Guam.
Yep.
And that came to be a couple years ago. We did the showcase in Nashville that our booking agent at the time got us into. And we performed for about 300 to 400 talent buyers, people who ran different venues across the US. And somebody part of the military, part of the branch of military, which was AFE, Armed Forces Entertainment. They saw Autumn Kings' live show. They loved it. They connected with our agent and we got it hooked up where we did bases in Japan, bases in South Korea, bases in Guam. And it was one of the greatest experiences of our life. It's crazy, you know. So first of all, we got, you know, awesome treatment. Everyone was so cool, respectful. And you got to see, as a guy, tough men. Like these guys were tough and tough women. Like really, really like mentally and physically capable and tough. And just to see what they go through in terms of their regimen, their discipline, and what they do on the other side of the world to keep us safe at home that nobody really knows about and sort of take for granted.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
that was all a really, really unique experience. It definitely deepened my appreciation for what those folks do.
Yeah. So you're literally, just to clarify, you're literally playing for American troops in
Yeah.
that. Okay.
Yeah. And
Cool.
at some spots too, like we did a festival in Okinawa and there was local Japanese population there too. But yeah, it was mainly American military personnel stationed on those bases, and they're sort of like mini cities. So it's really funny. You get your Subway, you get your Burger King, your Pizza
You
Hut.
do not stop.
Oh,
That's funny.
it's like mini America over there. But so what's really amazing is so not only that, and meeting all the American military there, and how much it means to them, right? Because they're going through some of them a really hard time, and they're deprived of entertainment and just the day to
Right.
day amenities and necessities that we all take for granted. And so having entertainment to us, it feels like a fun vacation. To them, it means much, especially because Autumn Kings has a pretty deep and serious message most of the time. And including,
Yes.
or you know, we played a show in the southern part of South Korea, and then went up to the north. And one of the guys and his wife at the base in South Korea, they traveled like 3 hours the next day to see us again because they were that moved by the message. And
Wow.
you would never think, it's just so that part of it was of course special. And then the other thing that I just get giddy talking about to my friends and people like you in interviews is the culture there was so fascinating. The Japanese culture of respect, professionalism, clean roads, how much they valued personal health, like mental health
Mhm.
and health. They take care of their bodies. They don't indulge in too much food and indulge in too much drink. Everybody's polite. It's funny. We had a show. We did this. We opened for Sugar Ray actually at Okinawa Summer Festival. It was
What? Oh my
off the
God.
yeah, it was off the rails. And so we had communicated to the venue what our stage requirements were. We need this drum kit here. We need these speakers here. And we had it all laid out and we sent it to them in like a Microsoft Word document or whatever.
Yeah.
And without
Yeah.
a single word of English or exchanging any words to them, when I tell you they had it to the millimeter, everything we asked for perfectly on stage, no words spoken, like the best, most professional crews I've ever seen. It just, I get goosebumps talking about it. I left
Wow.
such a tremendous respect and regard for the people and the culture there.
I want to write a thank you note to whoever that translator was too. Like just or whoever that intermediary was that made sure everything was perfect. Like yeah, that
uh,
takes work.
I know it takes a lot of work. It really does. It was a beautiful experience. But yeah, and actually, I'm probably not supposed to say this either, but I'm going to. Next year, we actually have more of those military shows in other parts of Asia, Singapore, and then a
Awesome.
couple other spots to be determined. But it's definitely special. It's a unique shade of what we do. It's not like the typical like the tour that we've got coming up next weekend. Very different sort of thing because it's military and it's not ticketed and we're not selling merch. We're really just connecting on a human to human level in an even deeper way than we do when we're doing just regular hard ticket shows.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you hinted at this too. It makes sense because you were alluding to the fact that your message and culturally the message of the military is very similar, specifically when it comes to conquering what you'll call victim mentality, championing, independent thought, courage. That word, it's kind of a buzzword at the moment, just victim mentality, that phrase, I should say.
Mm,
People have different definitions of like what it means, what it is.
right.
You're all about overcoming it. That's the whole point of a lot of Autumn King's lyrics.
Yeah.
What how do you define victim mentality?
I think victim mentality is a surrender to the universe that you have no control over your circumstances and that your behavior doesn't really make a difference anyway. That's
Mhm.
probably the most succinct way that I would put it. And I know for myself because I sort of fell into that during the pandemic, feeling like I had no
Mm,
agency or no autonomy to control my mind and to control my actions and to do good for people and with people. And so I think the best thing we can do is realize that we have a lot more choice in our lives. I kind of picture it like something happens to you. You don't like it. It irks you. Like in your subconscious and in your gut, it hits you. Your reaction is over here. And then somewhere in the middle is that leeway to decide how to react to what just happened and channel it for the better or for the worse. And I think people feel like they've been deprived of that choice in the middle to not get angry if your spouse says something that didn't sit
yeah.
well, or if you feel like you got slighted when you were at school or working in business or something like that. And instead of saying everything is against me, we can say, well, how can I choose a more positive perspective, but not in a positive, delusional, fake way to try to just fake it through, but one that's equally grounded in reality, but is a more useful, positive way of doing it. That's sort of how I look at the conquering of victim mentality. It's that personal excellence and it's that mindset that I have much more choice than I might believe I do to alter my circumstances. And of course, that's not applicable to everybody. Some people truly go through unbelievably hard things that they need a helping hand. But I think for a lot of us, we don't give ourselves enough credit of what we're able to overcome on our own and through our own will and courage, as you said earlier.
Yeah, no wonder it makes a great pairing, you and the military. Completely get it now. Similar
Yeah.
mentalities. I really do. When did that light bulb moment happen for you? That aha moment where you realize, wait, I do have more control over my own life than I thought I did.
I'll tell you this. This is a super candid moment. Is I thought growing up, my childhood was excellent. Like it really was. I didn't have any major trauma. I had two parents in the house. Yeah, I would do certain things differently than they did, and of course, I think we could all say that about our parents. But generally, everything was great. I had a great group of friends. Grew up in a safe neighborhood. Didn't grow up poor. Right, grew up a nice middle class upbringing. And so I lived a pretty fairy tale experience. And then the band started, and I was never used to not succeeding. Right, so for the first few
Oh,
I worked hard enough. I got what I wanted. It was very simple until I was about 23 and the pandemic happened. And all of the momentum got swept from our feet. All of these shows that we had lined up. It's one thing if you're Taylor Swift or Shinedown or Nickelback and you're already huge, you had your base who wasn't going to leave you, whether or not you were there for a few years or not. But we were right up, just about to hit the top of what we felt was like Mount Everest. And then boom, fell right to the bottom.
ugh.
It was the first time in my life that I realized I actually can't control everything. And so then I got really angry and I got really resentful. I got really anxious. And then I started becoming a victim. And
Mm.
then for a few years, it affected me on a mental level, it affected me on a physical level. And then I started believing for the first time that, wait, maybe the band can't succeed. And it was the first time I had doubts. I never ever thought I would have a doubt about the band. And then when the pandemic happened, I just didn't respond well to it because temperamentally, that's not who I am. Enforced leisure is not something that really sits well with me. And so getting used to that and accepting things that are out of your control made me actually, I couldn't accept it. So then I became more of a victim. And then finally, I got fed up with that. And I decided, I don't care what happens. I don't care how many more rejections we get. This is before we had the team of awesome people we have now. We've got great agent, manager, label. At that time, we had nobody. It was Joe and I, right? And our parents didn't understand it. How could they? They came
Yeah.
from a world. Our friends didn't get it. They're not in our industry. So I sat down and said, okay, what's the move on the chessboard here? Because being a victim and saying that I'm just been so hard done by isn't isn't the useful move here. And so we decided to just push on, keep going, even when we didn't feel like it, even when it still continued to suck. And then what happened is because we chose to take action and use the autonomy and agency we had, success started happening way faster than we could have imagined. It happened a couple months later. We got this great military tour actually, and then management followed, and then radio success followed, and a record deal followed, and all of these things. And I thought, God, imagine I just stayed a victim in my head and said, I'm so hard done by because a pandemic hit me. And so
Yeah.
that we came out of it and preached that so much because it worked for us. The conquering the victim mentality led to a happier life and more success in the process.
Great mindset. What is next for Autumn Kings? What can we look forward to coming from you?
Well, we've got the tour starting next week, which is our first 30-day, month-long tour all across from Detroit to Orlando to San Fran and everywhere in between. So we are absolutely stoked about that. We've got almost a full record done of new music, which is going to be crazy. And as every artist, whoever comes on your podcast probably tells you, we think this is our best music yet. So
I can't wait to hear it anyway. I can't wait to give it a listen anyway. I'm stoked. A lot of great things coming. Best way to follow you guys all over social media, I'm assuming.
I would say we're most active on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube Shorts, even TikTok too. But I would say Instagram is probably the number one for us. And then, of course, Spotify, Apple, and whatever else you use to listen to music.
Right. Or maybe even at your nearest Tim Hortons. Are you Tim Hortons guys? Okay.
Yeah, I like the Tim Hortons food. We have a lot of, the band doesn't really get in big fights, but there are debates about like the quality of hot chocolate at Tim Hortons versus Starbucks. Like, I can't do Hortons, the hot chocolate and the coffee. Just like it messes with my energy. Starbucks, it's just it revs you up to 100 every time. So,
yeah, it does.
but
Because I'm definitely learning that it's more of like an Eastern Canadian thing and not so much a Western Canadian thing. Because I went to Winnipeg on a road trip as soon as I got my passport, just because I wanted to get a passport stamped. That's literally the only reason. And I live in Minnesota, so for me that's like an 8-hour drive. It's really not that bad.
yeah,
And I was like, where is the Tim Hortons? And the only one that I found was in wherever the Winnipeg Jets play. Because we watched the Winnipeg Jets and the Chicago Blackhawks. And
mhm.
that was it. And then I had other people tell me, oh no, it's more of like an Eastern Canada thing. It's not so big in
Interesting.
the West. And
Oh,
I
that's
was
fun.
like,
Did you like the Tim Hortons? How did it hit you?
yes, that was
Yeah,
my bucket. That was a bucket list dream to watch an actual hockey game in Canada with beer and some and some Tim Hortons. That was what I did. I
that,
mean, that might be so stereotypical, but that's what I wanted to do.
that is like as Canadian as it gets. But you know what's funny? Minnesotans too. I actually say I think Minnesotans have a tinge of Canadian in them. Actually,
Cousins,
yeah,
literally. Like,
100%, hundred
and
percent.
I'm not even originally from like Minnesota, but I guess I don't know. I got the bug the longer that I've been living here, and I've
Yeah,
been a hockey fan forever. That was really the reason why I wanted to do that trip at all, was just to watch the Jets for the hell of it. But it's
and one of the importance is that Tim Horton was a hockey player. I don't know.
yeah,
He was an NHL, so it's called Tim Hortons, and it's such a ingrained part of Canadian culture. Like even like, on the news last week, some like politician was on or whatever, and they're all walking like in their suits, and they all have Tim Hortons coffee. I'm like this. I'm just
it's
laughing. The most Canadian thing. So good.
oh my God, that's hysterical. Well, I can't wait to see what's next. Thank you so much for your time, Jake. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me, Val. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.